Thursday, more than halfway through this first real multi-track virtual meeting. This is the agenda that we have so far. Is there any agenda bashing? Does anybody wish to speak about anything else or reorganize any of this? I'll give you a moment to do that. Nobody needs to do blue sheets, of course, which gets rid of one of our annoyances. It's all automatic. All right, with that said, I put JMAP calendars up first. So Neil, would you like to speak to that, or Robert? You need to ask for audio as well. Otherwise, we'll just see your face and nothing else. There we go. I can also stop sharing if you would like to show any slides.
No, it's fine. I don't have some.
I still don't hear you.
Oh, really? It's showing up as...
Maybe it's just me.
Coming through. Is it just you?
Yeah, it's just me, sorry.
Okay, fine.
Fixed.
Cool. Yes. So JMAP calendars. So since last time, I've added the basically actioned all the things that we agreed last time we met, which was a while ago now, which has added in a few new features, mainly the stuff about allowing invitees to invite other guests, allowing people who have access to share calendars to add themselves to events, being able to give permission for that. That's all in there, and I think it's fairly complete at this point. We're waiting on JS calendar being absolutely final, which is any day now and has been for a few months. We've got the Calex session tomorrow, so hopefully we'll have that done very shortly, which is the kind of data model underneath. And then JMAP calendars is nearly ready, but waiting on some implementation experience mainly. Once we've got that, I'll also flesh out a load more examples, which will be easier when we have implementations, because I can just use those to copy and paste the JSON, and then you don't mess it up as you do by hand. And some tidying up to do at that point. But so that's kind of the status. It's a bit blocked really on implementation. In terms of other stuff, there's the one other thing I thought I'd mention is the iCalendar and CalDAV has this formal delegation system where you can invite someone to an event and then they can formally delegate their attendance to someone else. And there's a whole handshake of sending to the organizer and to the invitee and stuff. I am intending to leave that out, and we can add that as an extension if people actually want to do it. My impression is that that's less used mainly these days, and the new abilities which aren't in the original CalDAV to just add other people is much simpler and is normally quite sufficient. And that's more what we see in like Google Calendar and Facebook events and that kind of thing. It's just much simpler for people to understand, and you normally don't need this whole formal delegation system. It's just, yeah, I can't go, but I'll add someone else to the event, whatever. So basically, if anyone objects to that and thinks this should be part of the core spec rather than left to an extension, should someone want it, let me know. And that's it. Any questions, comments on status or other stuff to JMAP calendars?
So the other outstanding thing that I had put in my review on the list was whether we should allow an event to exist in multiple calendars at the same time.
Oh, yes, that again. Yeah.
Yes, so there were some side effects of that involving whether there were default alerts on calendars, and also whether floating events, what time zone they would be in if the calendars had different time zones. So I'd be interested in hearing from the rest of the group if anyone has strong opinions one way or the other on that. I quite like the fact that it works the same way then between calendars and emails that can be in multiple mailboxes. But I am aware that there are some complexities there. The use case that's particularly valuable here is something like for a family where each person has their own calendar, and events can be tagged as being on the calendars of the people who need to care about that particular event.
Yeah, and I think that is an interesting use case. So this is worth considering. I think that's that could work quite nicely. It's certainly definable. The downside is it does get slightly more complex, because if your event says use the default alerts and it's in 2 different calendars with 2 different sets of default alerts, then you have to kind of merge those together for that event. Again, doable, but just slightly more complicated.
Yeah, certainly in that use case, there'd be an alert that sends to each calendar would have the alert for that person, I guess. For display, that might be a bit weird, I guess. Yeah. But often each person would only be looking at one calendar anyway, so they might only get the alerts for their own.
That's true for that particular situation. Yeah. Yeah, I am coming around to this idea a bit more. I was not particularly keen in previous meetings, if the minutes will probably show. I think probably the biggest disadvantage is just simply that I don't know. It's all the existing calendar systems I know don't allow it, and therefore it makes implementation a bit more of a challenge, because it's going to map not quite as closely. But we'll probably do what we did in mail, which is you allow it in terms of the spec, but you allow the server to say the maximum number of calendars an event can be in, and it can always set it to 1 if it doesn't want to support this, basically. So then the server doesn't have to support this, but it's in the protocol.
That seems reasonable. Yeah,
that's what we have in mail, and that seems reasonable. Yeah, okay. Anyone else got comments on this? Anyone know what we're talking about? It's tricky without being able to see the room.
Ken, go ahead.
Neil, this is Ken. My concern is, how is this going to interoperate with scheduling? So if I have a single schedule event in multiple calendars, and I receive either, let's say, an update from a participant, or the organizer changes the date and time, do I update all copies then?
Yes, it's essentially one. It's like with email. It's actually only one instance. Okay, it's not an example because of our implementation, but
no, yes.
Okay, yeah. So they're all references to a single object
that happens. A single object that happens to appear in multiple calendars, but if you update it, it's always updated everywhere. There's no different versions in the different calendars. It's the same ID in each one, if you like. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think that's difficult at all. That's not one of the problems.
Cool. And it allows you to use the same patching syntax that we do for keywords and mailbox IDs in email. So it's a fairly
I do like the symmetry
JMAP
with
style.
mailbox IDs. It does, make that neater, more consistent. All right, I'll look at that, as there doesn't seem to be any objections, unless I think of some other reason why it's not going to work when I start documenting it. But
all right, do you have anything else on JMAP calendars for this meeting?
I don't really. I said I think hopefully we'll get some implementation of the spec in the next few months, and we'll be able to then go from there.
Cool. All right. Thank you. Next is JS Contact. So
how do I leave? Sorry.
Up in the top left, or I can just kick you.
So, hello. Next slide, please. So for JS Contact, we had discussed in the interim mainly about adopting the vCard mapping that Mario has been mostly working on in the last weeks. I see Mario is here, so please jump in, Mario, whenever you deem appropriate. So this document is in my understanding, very far already. There are only very few spots that still need some sorting out of mapping between vCard and the JS Contact format that we propose. JS Contact format. For JS Contact, for the data model itself, there hasn't been much progress itself. That's mainly on me still being working on the JS calendar topic. from our last session, we had a look at, they're still open to define probably other address format. There's still the idea to check what the ISO group is doing in terms of address profiles. I still don't have a clear picture on what's the status there. An alternative that might be interesting is that what we did for names, which also had the issue of being originally defined in a Western-centric format, and where we basically now are using an array of typed name properties, and this allows way more. This allows way more different structures in name than original. This might also come useful for addresses. So basically, we define an ordered list of building blocks, of typed building blocks of address strings. If you want to get to the full address, you just concatenate the complete list. But still, since the blocks itself are typed like street or municipal or whatever, you can still pull out the metadata about each string component. I think we'll look more into that if it's useful, and in tandem also we'll look more into the ISO address group formats. Which brings me already to the next slide, please. So basically, the next steps I see for this effort is that one, to look into addresses. The other is revisiting the way we organize the data within JS content. I think we've pretty much nailed down all that we want to cover, and the mapping document that was mentioned before is giving us a kind of certainty that we are not missing crucial stuff from vCard. However, looking at the mapping in the wire representation, there is a whole bunch of properties named value and stuff. So it's kind of verbose how it comes across on the wire. And I want to revisit the layout to make it more in tandem with the JMAP way how it is organized, for example, for email, and what we also were leaning much on when we defined JS calendar. So that's one of the next steps I'd like to be working on. And when we do that, that's also going to make it more nicely with the patch object that we also are using for JMAP email and JS calendar to come to concise representation of changes to an existing contact in this example. That's basically the status. And I'm not sure if Mario, would you have something to add?
No, nothing else.
Okay, great. So then this concludes the presentation of the JS contact status.
Thank you. Is there anything that either of you need from the working group at this stage? Reviews, feedback?
I don't think so, no, at least for me. I think a thorough review of the working group will be very useful once we got a good grasp on the data structure that we want to finally have. But this is on me first to come up with that. In that respect, I think it also doesn't make sense to set a deadline or something at this point. I think we'll just keep working on this over the next time.
Next on our list is JMAP quotas. Now, I have heard, where is it? This one here. I have heard that, unfortunately, the authors are not able to join in due to confusion about login capability, and hence can't log into this session, and it's too late to probably fix it now. But the slides have good information about what the current state is, some things have been moved around in the recent change that's just been published based on the feedback we've had. Again, making it more JMAP-ish. I guess I'm just going to flick through the slides now. I'm not going to read it all out to you because we can all read, hopefully. Does anyone have any questions based on what's been published or any feedback on what's there? I think probably the next thing I would ask the group to do is read what's there and give feedback on it. And then, assuming there are no other changes required, I would go to a working group last call fairly soon. Anybody? All right.
I haven't
Alexei.
read it, but I will make sure it's consistent with IMAP quarter.
Great, thank you.
Probably a subset of information available in some way.
All right, next on the list is SMIME. Alexei, lovely black background.
You need black background once in a while, don't you?
No,
Right.
no, you don't.
But I like it. Right, next slide, please. So just the changes is 0.2. I posted new version. Previous version contained two server-generated attributes as SMIME status, which is like whether it was signed and whether signature verified or failed, etc. And SMIME errors, which is a list of human-readable errors encountered during verification. And now there is an extra property, SMIME verified at, which says what time the SMIME status and SMIME errors was set, basically. And then there was also a clarification that the SMIME errors can be affected by language selection as per base JMAP. Next slide, please. So yeah, I think the only remaining question is, do we want to say, was the signature valid at type thing? So in case at the moment it's basically the first time you request a SMIME status, or maybe on mail message delivery, it will be set for the first time, and then it all has to be refreshed by the server every 10 minutes or so, which is a caching period. Do we want to have a way of saying, was the signature valid at the time of the the message was supposedly sent, for example? Yeah, comments, please.
Maybe. I actually have a question slightly related to that. So this is essentially a mutable property on the email object because it can change, but it's not. We don't expect it to like push state change when it is invalidated, right?
I assume not.
Okay.
I mean, it's like
as long as it's documented, it's just because that's a bit different to other stuff. But I don't. Yeah, it wouldn't really make sense for this to push a state change, I don't think.
I mean, I suppose
really
if your signature is going to if your signature stopped being valid in 10 minutes because your certificate expires, I don't know how useful this is. Some people might find it useful. I don't know. Tempted to think that we probably don't need this, but if people think that we do, that this can be edited.
Yeah, I don't think you need this. I wonder whether what you want though is it's always kind of set on delivery, because that seems to be when it should be done, and you could have a valid until if you really want to say when did the certificate expire that we validated it with. I don't know if that's actually useful, but you could.
was valid at delivery is a field that could then be immutable and calculated by the server at delivery time.
Do you ever really want anything else? I don't know. Alexa, you would know the use cases more. Isn't it normally when it was delivered that you actually most care about?
Possibly when it was generated, in case it was expired en route. I know it's sort of very obscure case, really.
Yeah, in that case, is it valid if it expires while it's in transit? How's that
probably
different from something that's generated against an old certificate and pretends to have taken a long time in transit?
I suppose it's the difference between it was never valid versus, well, maybe it was valid at some point. I know.
And what's a user meant to do with that?
Yeah.
I mean, other than ignore it.
Yeah, I have a lot of heartburn about the idea of telling people that something used to be valid but isn't anymore, because that kind of violates the whole concept of expiration from a security.
If the server says I validated it at the time and it was valid at the time, that has value, I think. But anything else, saying if I had validated it in the past, it would have been valid, that I don't think that is meaningful.
No.
I think there is some value in having sort of historical validity for forensic reasons, for evidentiary reasons or whatever. I'm not sure that it's a use case that necessarily needs to be implemented, for most people, though.
Yeah, so the question is whether it's worth having that in the JMAP protocol, or if this is a fetch the raw bytes and do raw validation on them yourself for forensic purposes.
Expect the security ADs to push back very hard on. And
so I think we're basically going toward just validating it once and then that's it, right?
That seems fine.
Okay. I probably wouldn't make it do on delivery in the sense that if you never fetch the message, why do you care? But well, I'll think a little.
I mean, the main thing there is if a certificate expires between delivery and you fetching it, like it does seem, as long as it was valid when it was delivered and you presume your store is secure and no one else has tampered with it, then that's
right.
Still a reasonable state to know about, I would have said.
Yeah, if your store is not tamper-proof, then what's the point of asking your store whether
what's the point of it anyway?
for this information? because your store could lie to you.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I think this is pretty close to being done. Then I'll just do one pass and see if anything needs clarifying in the relationship to the discussion we just had.
The other aspect of this is that we're talking about something that's really an end-to-end signature, and so really what the store has to say about it is not especially relevant.
Yeah, the idea is that the store is acting as part of your end in the case that you're using this protocol rather than fetching the bytes directly.
Right. It's an optimization if you trust the store. Okay, I think I probably have enough feedback for now. So one more revision and then maybe working group last call?
I think so.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Next thing we have is Ken's JMAP Civ, which I did not add the slides to the data tracker for, so I'm just searching for them now, and I will upload them. So Ken, if you want to start talking while I find them and get them displaying.
So this is currently an individual draft. I'm just going to give a brief intro of what it is, and then see if there's interest in the working group to adopt it as a work product.
All right, it'll be up in just a moment. Sorry, the data tracker is a little bit slow. There we go.
And there we go. All right, so next slide, please.
Oh, sorry. Where are we? There you go.
All right, so what are we talking about here? So basically, we're talking about using JMAP to manage Civ scripts on a server. The current draft essentially is just a one-to-one mapping of current managed Civ functionality and semantics onto JMAP. Next slide, please. So current draft, here's what it looks like. Within the account capabilities, we have the list of JMAP, Civ extensions, any other pertinent information such as max redirects, notification methods, all the stuff you normally see in the capabilities within managed Civ. A Civ script object is fairly simple, has a server set ID, a name, its content, and whether or not it's active. One downside of using string for the content is escaping within JSON becomes not problematic, just tricky, cumbersome, but I'll discuss a little bit about that further down. Next slide, please. In terms of the protocol itself, it's fairly simple. There's only 3 methods at this point. There's a standard get method, which gives us what getScript and listScript do within managed Civ. The set method gives us virtually everything else in terms of manipulating the script. And then there's a new validate method, which provides the same functionality that we get with the current check script within managed Civ. Next slide, please. Possible things to change if we move this forward within the group. One question I had was, does anybody use have space? And if so, do we need to add that to this particular protocol? Bron on the list had suggested we add a query method and a test method. Both of those would be fairly trivial, at least in my implementation, to add, and I think they both provide useful functionality. Another one of Bron's ideas is to use blob IDs to reference a script rather than using a string. This could be done via either uploading the script and then referencing the blob, or use a new object and method that Bron has implemented in our server for doing blobs, basically setting blobs within a set of calls. I don't, Bron, do you want to discuss that at all here, or?
Yeah, I think I should propose a new draft in new business for this. It allows you to set a blob with either just raw content or base 64 content, and then that gives you a blob ID that you can use for everything else. So it is quite useful across all of JMAP for small things.
Okay, next slide, please. And there's also some discussion on the list amongst mostly Fastmail people about the isActive flag and being able to set that as an atomic action amongst other things. I don't want to get into the weeds here too deeply until we actually decide this is going to be a working group item. But maybe it's, Bron, why don't you go to the next slide and see if people have interest. And if there is interest, maybe we can discuss this a little bit here. So bottom line is there any interest here to add this to the group, or should the Fastmail folks just kind of keep this as their own private extension? Alexei.
Right, as one of the people listed on managed RFC, I think that would be a great addition to JMAP.
Okay, great, thank you.
This looks interesting.
Alexei, while you're on, have you seen a lot of people use the have space command?
Don't know. I suppose it's like
one of the open issues that I had that I have listed in the current draft is whether or not have space would dovetail with JMAP quotas at all. And if that would be useful.
Probably should be consistent with it, right? Or should be like a special subset of it. Yeah. It is very quota-ish, isn't it?
It's very quota-ish. And you would probably return the over quota JMAP response if you tried to set something that ran you over space.
Right.
Right. Okay. Well, Brian, how does this work? Do we adopt this pending no objections?
Yeah, I think the next step is for me to do a call for adoption on the mailing list. I'm pretty sure it belongs in the JMAP working group rather than the extra working group, since it is a JMAP extension.
I agree.
It makes more sense to be here.
Okay, great.
All right, I'll do a call for adoption.
And then in regards to have space, hopefully once this is adopted, I suggest there is an example using quota to show how this is going to look like.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Any other feedback at this point on this? Guess not. That concludes everything I think that we have slides for. We're well ahead of time. I took any other business off the list because I expected us to run out of time here, but we actually have over 15 minutes left. Let's have a look at the milestones that we currently have in the working group. All right, so these are the milestones that we have. MDN has been submitted. JS Contact vCard has been adopted. JMAP S-MIME will be submitted soon. That's going to go to last call. Quotas, August looks tight. S-MIME key management and server-side signing / encryption. Alexei, are you interested in submitting a document for that still?
Yes. Can we push this milestone a little bit, because I have so many documents I'm trying to finish at the same time. So
all right.
Of October.
October, cool. JMAP access to address books. This is going to be on top of JS Contact. I might push that one out to December, I think, realistically. Submit JMAP calendars to ISG. November looks viable for that, I'd say, given that we are close to done with it and it's just waiting for JMAP calendars, which is also nearly done. Sorry, JS calendar. The informational document is still sitting with December as its deadline. We'll leave it there and see what we get to. And I think JS Contact looks reasonable too. So we just have a couple of things to push back a little bit. Obviously, I will add something for the JMAP Civ to this, and I think probably December. Ken, do you think that's reasonable after the next IETF meeting?
In terms of what, submitting a 0.0 draft, or actually getting it complete?
No, getting it finished and through to ISG.
All depends how contentious some of the outstanding issues are. Whether we want to go with with blob set and some of the other things. But yeah, I'm willing to work on it. That's for sure.
All right. I'll set myself a deadline for call for adoption for the blob to be fairly soon as well. And that should be able to float fairly close with, I imagine. The blob is quite a simple spec.
Yes.
Certainly blob set is.
I will mention
the other
for people that are interested in JMAP Civ, there is a brief discussion right now just amongst 3 of us at Fastmail already on the list. So if people want to chime in, please do.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, the other thing, why don't I turn my video on so I'm not just a disembodied voice if I'm going to be doing a bunch of talking. The other thing with blob is that I'll probably split it into 2 documents, one of which will be totally non-contentious and involves setting a blob for use purely within the session that it's being used in, or possibly with an option to make it a permanent blob rather than a temporary blob. The other one is a much more complex thing that we've implemented in our server, which is basically a reverse index lookup of a blob. You pass a blob ID and say which emails reference this blob, which calendar events reference this blob, etc., which is used for permission checks in some of our stuff. In particular, for when our support agents look at a mailbox, it checks whether the email is referenced from a particular mailbox or a particular folder that is allowed for support agents to look at, and everything else gets suppressed. So that's probably worth documenting that as well, but that is going to be a more complex and less simple thing to push through. So getting just the blob set as a separate document makes sense. All right, we have another 13 minutes. Does anyone have any other business? I'm seeing a lot of silence. Jim.
Oh, maybe that didn't come
Hello.
through. I was just saying you ran a very efficient meeting, Brian.
Oh, thank you very much. And thank you for taking notes at both sessions. That was excellent.
Sure. Well, check them over. I'm not as
I've got them
skilled and experienced as you are at that.
I have them open in my other screen here, so I'll go put some notes in there. Alexi.
Jim, you put something in the notes. Yeah, do you want to ask it? Your question about blob.
It was more of a joke than anything.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Yeah, the question was, what do you call a blob once you split it?
Bob. No, wait. That's just taking the L out.
Bull and ob. I don't know.
Yeah. It sounds like there's a mitosis or meiosis joke in there someplace.
There you go.
It's always someone's tosis. All right. Well, should we go wander over to Gathertown and hang out there or something? I think we are done here. We will have, I guess, another meeting in Bangkok, probably right here in Meet Echo or whatever solution we're using that time around. Barry.
Almost certainly. I'm just babbling about Bangkok. I would love us not to cancel it, but I'm not. I'm almost certain we will.
Yeah, the 0 nights in Bangkok appears to be the plan.
Yeah,
that's the musical says.
We'll find out soon enough.
Yeah,
everybody.
But anyway, regardless, we'll be ready to meet again by then and talk about things. So I'll see you on the lists.
Bye-bye.
All right, thanks everybody.
See you.
Bye.